So I'm so excited about this panel. I don't have no notes, so we about to wing it because I know
Yes.
That's the
y'all
best
in
way
this
to do
thing.
it.
Y'all in this thing. So today we really have the pleasure of having three powerful production companies representing Hollywood here to talk to our filmmakers. You think it's about getting to the green light, but they gonna throw some curveballs, and y'all gonna be like, oh, okay.
We're
So
going to
that's
keep
what I
it
need
really
to do.
real.
Right. So let's
Okay.
just be clear.
Y'all need to
This
know
is
the truth.
Shayla. Shayla's from Shayla Cowan. She's from Will Packer.
Cowan.
Cowan. Oh,
It's
my
fine.
bad. Shayla Cowan, for our live listeners out there, from Will Packer Productions, and she is now Chief of Staff of Will Packer Productions and Will Packer Media. We have Elon Washington. She is she is the founder of Black Film Allegiance. That's in her core. And then now she is also the development manager for Monkeypaw Productions. And then we have Liliana Granados.
Yes.
Yes. She's a creative executive from JuVee Productions. We are so happy to have you ladies here today. So, randomly reached out, didn't think it was gonna happen. I knew Shayla was gonna be like, wait, it's like a month away and you trying to like get me to Austin? I was like, Shayla, we met one time, she dropped some gems on me at the Gathering Spot in Atlanta. I changed my whole life. And I said, okay, I'm gonna just do it. See if she'll ride with me. And she's here. She is here.
I'm here. What's up, guys? What's poppin'? Everybody up?
Right.
Right.
I have to tell these stories because they're so important because if you, my mom used to say, if you don't ask, well, if you don't ask, you won't get it. You know, so the only thing that people can tell you is no, and then you move on. So this was a product of asking. We didn't know Elon. Someone said, oh, I got to contact that Monkeypaw. They threw it to Winston, who's the festival executive director. And he's like, Desirae, I don't know what to say to her. And I was like, okay, let's just think. And so she had a call with
Y'all
us.
know we humans, right? Regular people.
People don't realize it because everyone, and that's just, of course you're humans. But when you have, like, everybody is sitting in a movie theater and seeing the work that you present, they don't assume that you still remain grounded. They assume
Right.
that you like on a whole nother level, and you are, but you still know where you came from.
Yeah, because
And
it can be taken away. So.
Right, absolutely. And Liliana is from our longtime supporter, JuVee Productions. Liliana represents, you sit kind of in a development position, a creative executive. So she's involved in the process of like people that are approaching JuVee and they want to get their project greenlit, and then also seeking out those individual films that may be a good fit for their production company. So, welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
A short, long introduction. We ain't got nothing but time. So I want to just kind of set the stage and understand, because you all have different stories. I want to start with Liliana. Liliana, where did you get your start?
Yeah, so I'm originally from LA, so I feel like the industry was around me, but I grew up in Inglewood, so it's also very far away from me. I went to USC School of Cinematic Arts and sort of, immersed myself in production, but then also really wanted to learn the business of it all. And everyone says if you want to be in the business, you have to start at an agency. So I started at CAA. And I had been at management companies before and saw that route as an intern. But CAA really gave me my start. And from there, I was really interested in indie and wanted to see where the heck the money came from indie. So I did a stint at a company that does international film sales. And then from there, I landed my dream job at JuVee.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what does that dream job entail, if you could just
Yeah.
break it down?
So with JuVee, we operate in two spaces. We are operating in a space where we have films at studios, and a lot of them have Viola attached to them, but we also operate from a space of having and supporting emerging voices. So our indie films and seeking out those voices, finding a way to support them, finding a way to get them to the green light. But we're both in the studio and the indie space, so reading stories, shaping them, and getting them through the entire path. Yeah.
So when I Googled Elon, I was like, first of all, she must be popping because I think her hair was purple or something. And I was like, okay, she might be rocking with us.
Now we're doing blue.
So Elon, tell us about first Black Film Allegiance and then segueing into your position at Monkeypaw.
Okay, and that also kind of ties into how I got into this. So I've been to multiple film schools. I started in Savannah College of Art and Design. First, I was at the Atlanta campus, then I went to the Savannah campus, and ultimately I was just looking for a well-rounded program. And they both had great aspects, but I just kind of wanted to collect information from everywhere I went. And so then I thought, okay, the film school is an excellent opportunity to relocate and have a community when you're going through that adjustment. So I thought, okay, I'm going to transfer to the New York Film Academy, and I did the LA campus so that I could move to Los Angeles. And so when I did that, I realized that it's difficult to kind of create a community when you move or when you're relocating across country especially. And so I started the Black Film Allegiance, which started off as like me wanting to kind of unify filmmakers at different schools, but expanded to me wanting to also promote filmmakers, highlight what their goals were, what their genre focuses were, so that other people could see them and they could have that visibility, so they could collaborate with one another, and so that industry folk like us could also kind of have a platform where we could see them as well. Oh, and then the monkeypaw aspect.
That's your baby. You can tell.
Yeah. No, it's because it kind of happened at the same time. So right after I started Black Film Allegiance, I got an internship position at Monkeypaw, and I pretty much got promoted from there, from intern to development coordinator, and from development coordinator to development manager, which is similar to what Liliana was describing. It does have to do with sourcing talent, but also I run and facilitate the development meetings that we have weekly.
Okay, awesome. And so it's interesting that I didn't intentionally save you for last, but now it works out because you have a completely different story. And so tell us how you got your start.
I'm gonna give you the short version, but so I was working in music and in Atlanta. I'm from Michigan, moved to Atlanta after college, and was working for an artist and just didn't enjoy it anymore. Randomly met Will in passing, and then about 6 months later, I left working in music, ran into him again, and he was like, yo, I'm looking for an assistant for a film called Stomp the Yard Homecoming. It's a crew member. It's not a lot of money. It might go to DVD. Are you interested? And I was like, well, what does that mean? So he told me to call this number, call the number, and this is how I'm here. So did the movie. 3 weeks before we wrapped, he offered me a position to come on as his executive assistant to him and Rob Hardy at Rainforest Films. And Rainforest Films had early films like The Gospel and Takers and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, under one condition. When you go make movies, I get to go with you. And that is how I learned. I got a very quick crash course in how to be a producer. And from there, we did several movies. Think Like a Man was my first theatrical movie as his assistant.
Oh, that's
and then,
a good one.
Right.
To start
and,
off with.
yeah, it was a great one to start off with. And then it was nonstop from there. So it was About Last Night, Wedding Ringer, Think Like a Man 2, and then the opportunity for us to do Ride Along came. And it was with a different studio. And so at the time, we were kind of like the Kevin Hart producer because we'd done so many movies with him. That opportunity came, which landed us a home at Universal and a crazy offer under film and television. And he looked at me and was like, so one of us has to move to LA and it's not gonna be me. And I was like, oh, okay, well, you know what? It was nice working with you. You know, you showed me so much, thank you. I'm not moving to LA. So he was like, I'll give you 24 hours to think about it. And we were actually in Vegas shooting a movie. And he was like, I'll give you 24 hours to think about it. So I called some folks that I trust, and they were like, you're crazy. If you don't say yes and keep it pushing. So I went back, said yes, and I moved to LA December of 2013 while we were promoting Ride Along internationally and domestically. January of 2014, I opened Will Packer Productions because...
First of all, can we come on?
Yeah, opened Will Packer Productions, and we hired a staff, and we released 4 movies that year, which is insane, and it's all she wrote. And about 4 years ago, I received my first producer credit on a film, and I've now received credit, and now I'm chief of staff of Packer Productions and Packer Media.
That's awesome.
So that's the short version.
Yeah, no, she did give me the long version. It was juicy, all type of details that only I'm privy to. So, but no, so it's interesting because one of the questions that I wanted to ask everyone, and you kind of answered it, was did you choose film or did film choose you? I feel like
Film definitely chose me because
Exactly.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I always had the mindset of doing what I loved, and I never thought about it from a financial standpoint. And my mom would be like, "You're nuts," because I would just do stuff because I enjoyed it with the hope of course, getting compensated for it. And funny story, when I was discussing with Will what I wanted to do and how I wanted to, be beneficial to him, no one had discussed salary. It didn't come up. I had been working for him for 3 weeks until the office manager came and said, "What's your salary?" And I was like, "Oh, we didn't talk about it."
Like, you didn't put your time in or nothing.
Right, but in those 3 weeks, we just got to work, and it felt right. And I don't know if you've ever had a chance to meet him or hear an interview. He's the nicest human being ever. And I just knew right then it didn't matter. So whatever I was going to get paid, I was going to figure it out. So it definitely chose me. I just didn't think in a million years that it would grow as quickly as it has, and I would literally be like his right hand. Never in a million years.
See, you just dropped all kind of jewels in that. I don't know if you was like well off and,
Not at all.
Ivy League
No,
grad, but
no,
leading with
not at all.
passion and not even thinking about like you reached and felt the energy and you was like, okay, this is a good situation.
My junior year of college, I was interning in New York, and the woman who was like, internships are shaky. They're either really good and beneficial, or it's like you're just going to get coffee. And so she had seen that I was always on time. I mean, my work ethic has been since I was a kid. It was just super important to just give 110%. And so she saw something in me, and she called me to her office one day, and she said, I know your internship is coming to an end, but whatever it is you do, you have the passion, you have the drive. Just do what you want to do. Even if it takes a little longer, even if it's not the money that you really want to make, just make sure that it's your passion, because what you don't want to do is end up in a dead-end job, unhappy, and much later in life find your passion. And literally, that was the best advice. Like, the fact that she told me that at that time in my life, my whole world changed. Like, even the classes that I took my senior year, it was like what I wanted to take versus like what I had to take. You know what I mean? And just my outlook on life and just approach on life. Like, I didn't mind helping people because it was something that I was interested in versus like figuring out who was going to pay me for it.
No, and that's really great. It's a lot of people can learn some lessons from that. And so that kind of leads me into Liliana.
Yeah.
You went to school for film, and you're in development. You're greenlighting films, but you're also a filmmaker, right?
Who told you that?
Right there in the hallway. No, but
Like
seriously,
today?
I gotta stay top of mind. I haven't been getting sleep. But tell us a little bit more about. So, did you choose film or did film choose you?
Film definitely chose me. I have a pet peeve when people are like, I've been filmmaking since I came out of my mother's womb. I'm like, no. But I started off wanting to act. And I don't like to share this story often. But in high school, I went to a predominantly white high school. And I grew up in a predominantly Hispanic community. So as I was auditioning for roles and parts, I wasn't getting cast, and it wasn't until senior year that I got cast as the maid. And I was like, it makes sense, I'm Mexican, I should be cast as the maid. But at that time, fortunately, my school did have a production class, and I took the class, and my teacher was very passionate about film, and it sort of opened my eyes into the full scope of filmmaking, and I thought, now that is the most complete way of art. You're adding visuals and sound and the script, and so that's where my passion sort of started. And I also saw it as an opportunity to create the stories and not be at the mercy of being cast in these roles. And I was, like 17. I don't know that I thought this way, the way I'm saying the story now, but it was a recognition at that point. And then living in LA, I went to UC Santa Barbara first, and they don't start until October, and I don't like to be bored. So I went on Craigslist, and I got this like internship from Craigslist out of this woman's apartment. She was a producer, right? I know. How did my mother allow this? I don't know. They had posters. Yeah, they had posters all over their office of short films that they never completed. So I learned a lot from their mistakes. And so I get to college, and you talk about the work ethic. I grew up in a beauty salon. Like, you go to school, then you work at the beauty salon. So like, you're always working. That's just been the way of life. I got to college with like my business cards, and I'm like, I can produce because I've had one internship. Like, and people were like, she has a business card, we're gonna hire her as a producer. And they did, and I'm a freshman, like, doing senior projects. And so then I knew going in that I wanted to transfer, and I was able to, tell my editor, I need, a 5-minute cut of a short for my application, and he cut it. And so I'm turning in my application, and I'm like, I produced it. I didn't direct it, I didn't write it, but I produced it, so let me into your school. Got into USC, and I did the same thing with the grad students. I'm like, I've produced a couple short films, like, I can produce yours. And I was just finessing my way into the grad program, and I'm like, I need undergrad credit for these grad classes, and getting involved in anything and everything. So graduated, was at CAA, tough job. Stopped producing shorts because there's literally no time. I was in the mailroom from 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. some days. But then 2 years later, got the opportunity to finally find a project that I was really passionate about, find the right group, and I was at a point where my boss was in a maternity leave, so I was like, I have time, and it was the most difficult project I've done. It was in the desert with a child at night with no budget. So I did that as I was, I was producing that as I started at JuVee, and that was also sort of a big selling point for me at JuVee. Being an artist-driven company, a lot of us have, not a side hustle, but we are able to fulfill our passion outside of the office.
The fact that you said that kind of segues into Elon.
Yeah.
Apparently, you started with your passion and ended up at Monkeypaw, and you're still growing Black Film Allegiance and still working for Monkeypaw. And so I don't want to ask you the same question, because I kind of feel like you gave us a little bit about your story and how you segued into working for Monkeypaw. But how do you balance working in development and not being like shooting a film or making your project? Do you still find fulfillment?
So the interesting thing about my perspective with all of this is that I'm not a huge fan of being on set, which is dissimilar from most people that I work with, because I solely like to write. So when I went to school, that was part of why I bounced around to so many schools, because these were all general filmmaking or directing, and it was great to learn a little bit of everything, but I specifically wanted to write. So the thing about writing is you can kind of do it anywhere, anytime, and by yourself. So that, in that sense, it's a little easier for me than it is for some of my coworkers that also like to direct and produce. But in terms of balancing the Black Film Allegiance aspect, sometimes it gets to be a lot, especially in terms of, and you already know, with managing the pages and the socials and, maintaining context and networking, because you get off work and then you go back to work for yourself, which has a different type of fulfillment in that sense. So it's like you're tired, but it's good tired.
So just because you're a part of Black Film Allegiance and you work so closely with independent filmmakers, do you get filmmakers reaching out to you like, okay, girl, I just finished it, and we went to 3 film festivals, and I got some laurels and some awards, and okay, what's next? Or I got something I want you to look at, because you're already kind of connected and rooted with independent filmmakers. Do you get a lot of that?
So yes, both ways. So first, on the side of like the creatives that are reaching out to me because of Monkeypaw, some people reach out on my LinkedIn or on my socials. In that aspect, some people will do submissions and have interest, and I'll be able to reach out and give responses to that. And to a certain extent, depending on what their attachments are and if they have representation, I can still entertain that as well. But then on the reverse side, when people at work are interested in somebody, I can say, because of course diversity is a big thing now, it's in vogue, and so I can say, oh,
cool now.
yeah, so I can say, oh, what do you know? Yes, I have a whole cohort of Black filmmakers that are interested in working for you, so what do you need? So that's part of why I like to promote them, so I can collect their individual interests and what their genre aspects are that they enjoy, then I can kind of see what I can do.
And actually, you reminded me of my questions that I tried to keep in my head. Because I wanted to start it off to kind of talk about diversity, because that's what this panel is based on. Of course, everybody is diversity and inclusion. We just want everyone to be accepted, and we want to, but like bottom line is like Black stories make a lot of money, or diverse stories make a lot of money, and that's what really drives the industry. So, I mean, in Hollywood, it's probably been a longer transition, and it wasn't always just based on the dollar, but I think that ultimately they've seen through, countless Will Packer films that are #1. They've seen, oh wait, there's money there. So now we need to diversify. It's not, we know it's not just because they want to make a transition. So tell me, just each of you, and we'll start with you, Shayla, like, you guys are kind of started being Black, and not, you didn't
Well,
have
we
to-
are Black, so let's start
I
there.
mean, kind of like, I don't know everybody, but no, what I'm saying, so, but what, when you guys think about stories that you want to tell and what you guys want to put out, you're telling, everything that you've done right now has been from a kind of a black, what we consider like a Black film. Is this intentional, or is just kind of like who you guys are? Is it going to change?
I think early on, Will realized that our demo was female. And so once you know your niche, you service that niche. The men will come, because the women will bring their men, and the dudes want to meet women, so they'll find their way, right? So early on, I think Like a Man kind of changed Hollywood, because that was a film that cost $13 million to make. It had an ensemble cast of now folks who are killing it, right? And it made $36 million opening weekend. So to shoot a movie with that small of a budget, that looked beautiful, that looked like it cost way more money, with that many faces of color, is huge. And at that moment, that's when Hollywood was like, oh, you don't need all this money to shoot a film, and you don't need all these days. By the way, that movie was shot in 35 days. We had 35 days to shoot that movie on location. You know what I mean? So the reality is, we've always known what our niche is. People say urban movies because we're Black, but ultimately a lot of our movies have crossed over, and they've just become movies based on the box office numbers.
Right.
So that's the reality. And as far as diversity goes, listen, it's a blessing that, times are changing and people are getting it. Do we need more color at the agency level, at executives, not just assistants and receptionists? Absolutely. Do we need more diversity at the studio level? Not just your CEs, but the heads of production and the heads of content? Absolutely. Is that gonna come? We hope so. But for now, companies like ours are putting those people in position. 60% of our office is female, right? And majority, it's all minority except for one Caucasian amazing man, Kelly Smith, who heads up our unscripted department. But the reality is, we also work with HBCUs to give kids opportunities for internships. So we're constantly pushing it out, and nothing brings me more joy than to know that there's other great production companies that look like me that are thriving and doing big things, because that just makes it easier. And more importantly, we all know each other, we all get along so well, and we're all doing the same thing, and that's just trying to empower the next round of filmmakers, because nobody's gonna do this forever, guys. You know what I mean? Yeah, so absolutely. It's so important to know, yes, you wanna be filmmakers, but what if you're really good with talent? Maybe you wanna be a talent agent. Maybe you wanna be, a literary agent. Maybe you wanna represent writers and producers. Understand those opportunities exist. You just have to be able to find them. So with going back to diversity, yes, it's happening, yes, it's real, and yes, it's taking a long time, but I don't think that we are as close as most think at the studio and at the agency level, which isn't talked about often.
Right. Thank you for that. We're on live and keeping it real.
I said that's the only way to be.
Seriously,
Like,
it's very true.
Yeah.
So Elon, share your perspective on where you sit at Monkeypaw and how you guys approach diversity.
So for us, it's within our 5-point programmatic thrust, which is to always prioritize underrepresented voices, and that could be people of color, it could be someone differently abled, it could be queer representation, it can mean a lot of different things. But that and also genre is a focus for us, as well as a social message. And the social message usually also ties to the underrepresented perspective, as well as a timelessness that Jordan enjoys, and then a sense of fun. Because we have so many hot-button social issues and messages involved, we like to always include an aspect of fun so that people can kind of receive the message better. And so because it's part of our original focus and goal, it's prioritized in everything that we do. So that affects what type of meetings we have. Not that we exclude people either, but they have to have, similar to what you were saying about now at your company, they have to have a particular point of view. Because at the end of the day, even for a movie like Get Out, there had to be people of both sides, and it was very, very important that we also had Caucasian people in there as well, but of a like-mindedness is always important. So diversity for us is not just in terms of representation, but the authenticity and the point of view that's articulated and all those involved on screen and behind screen.
and relatability. Like, relatability is so important. Like, for instance, Girls Trip. Every female either knew or was one of those characters. If not, you were a mashup of all of them. And I think the idea of being able to go to the theater and being able to see people that look like you and that they're not like in distress and, you know, they dress fly and they have good jobs and their hair is laid, like, that's important to see when you go to the theater.
Absolutely. And Liliana, I know, we have a kind of an ongoing relationship with JuVee Productions, and one of the things that you guys, not only do you focus on diversity, but also focus on stories that kind of position diverse characters in a certain way. And this is not a conversation that we've had, so I'd love for you to kind of expound upon, like, how do you guys approach the stories that you're interested in as it relates to diversity and also as it relates to, like, the outcome?
So as it relates to diversity, we, sort of just say it's just part of our DNA. We're not necessarily trying to, shape it that way. It should just be that way. Diverse stories should be baked into the product. We get a lot of agents that call us and say, we have this boy meets girl story, and it's fine, like, we can cast them black, like, it's perfect for you. And it's like, that's not what we do. Who is the boy? Who is the girl? How are they falling in love? Where do they come from? What is their perspective? And that's going to inform the story. So diversity is sort of this idea of, why does it have to be in the zeitgeist? We hope that this movement isn't just a movement and a fad, but we're hoping that it stays. And with that in mind, we're focusing on authentic stories. Authentic, as you spoke about with diversity, it's not just about race, ethnicity, it's also about, differently abled, whatever your sexual preference is. We can make a story about a dude in Wisconsin, but it has to be a culturally specific story that is very unique to where they came from and who they are. And with that said, we try to focus on stories that are empowering. So, as Shayla mentioned, it's not a character in distress. Of course, there has to be something to overcome in a story, but we want to, portray exceptional people that were, able to overcome because of themselves, not despite of themselves. They aren't saved. They saved themselves. They had recognized that power within to create a wonderful world around them.
And so, I'm sure people knew there's not one way to get to the green light. There's like a million ways. But like, let's kind of think about where you sit and what you've seen and experienced in dealing with independent filmmakers who are trying to get their films greenlit. what's one way not to get to the green light? Let's start there.
I have one.
I got 24.
What I see that happens a lot is people will say, "Oh, we have another version that's kind of like Get Out, but XYZ, or kind of like Us and XYZ." But it's like people don't realize that if we've already done it, we're not interested in repeating it. So I think that if people were to create or pitch what the next thing might be with kind of the same intentionality in mind, then that would be great. But not something so similar, because that happens all the time. And it's usually an instant, "Oh, no, thank you, and we appreciate it."
Right. And what about you, Liliana?
I mean, likewise, do your research. Like Elon mentioned, when you're comparing to something that's already been done, it's like, why would we do it again? We want to challenge the status quo and become a tastemaker. But with that said, too, I mean, don't send a cold email. Don't deliver sketchy packages to the office. Try to make a connection, and we are human. So, and we are approachable, we're nice, kind people. So there are ways, attending panels, volunteering on a set, just being part of the community. There are ways to get in touch, as opposed to like being forceful and sketchy and like doing things out of the blue.
Right. And so, Shayla.
Takes out the list.
That face says it all.
I think what you shouldn't do is run up on nobody with a script in hand or 10 scripts in
Guys,
hand.
put your scripts back
I
in
think
your bag,
that
okay?
I think
Shayla's not
people
bored.
get really excited, and listen, we are in blessed positions, but ultimately we can't receive your material for legal reasons. Because what happens is, say this young lady here gives me her script and I haven't read it, but we have a project coming out, and she calls, well, that's like and then we get sued. Like, that's what happens, and that's the reality. And like the ladies have said, I think it's a good idea for you to understand what our companies are about, or any company that you're interested in, and don't submit something that is like something that we've already done. Because 9 times out of 10, if we are going to do a sequel, it's already in the working. You know what I mean? And trying to do the opposite of what we did, it's not gonna work. So my advice is bet on yourself. If you believe that you have wrote a project, or you believe you are an incredible producer, or you think you are an awesome director, get within your community and find folks that are like-minded like you, and figure out a way to pull your resource together and shoot something. Shoot a short. And festivals like this are all around the country. And submit and allow buyers and allow other filmmakers to see your work. Those are the best folks to tell you if you are headed in the right direction. Sometimes you have to allow Hollywood to come to you versus you having to run to Hollywood, because those doors are gonna close and it's gonna be frustrating. The other thing is, it's a true grind. So this is unlike any other industry. There are so many people trying to do the exact same thing that you all wanna do. So you have to have that idea and have that project that stands so left field that would make people be like, oh, damn, I need to know what that is. So again, within your community, there are folks, there are hair, makeup, there are cameramen. Those people exist. And Nikki worked on Stomp the Yard Homecoming. Like, those people actually exist. Work within yourselves. Trying to get to us is going to be tough. And 9 times out of 10, it's gonna be a pass. So why don't you create your own and just put it out there in the world and see what the world says about it?
Okay. I want to leave, first of all, y'all know I sent 37 questions this morning, but I forgot we have to let the audience ask some questions, so I'm just.
It's the best
ask
part.
One more question. When you get that opportunity to sit at the table with Shayla or Elon or Liliana, what should you bring to the table? Like, what should your package look like? What means I'm professional, I know what I'm doing, and I'm answering all the questions that you're gonna have in that meeting? And Elon, can you answer that one?
Yes, so if it's a pilot, well, it's kind of different per category. But if it's a pilot or a short, or they want to adapt it into a series, then I like to see a lookbook, so I can kind of see the visuals for what they're intending in their mind.
Wait.
Oh.
Okay.
Well, a lookbook, as in something that kind of shows the visuals for how they see the project going, particularly if they're expecting to direct it also. But also that gives a breakdown of the characters and who they view them as, what they think they would look like. It has multiple different categories, but essentially it's just a visual component to pair with your project. And that's great because it can kind of give us an idea of how much it might cost and different aspects of that, or the casting potential. I also like to see, if it is a series proposal for how it would end up multiple seasons from now. How did these characters grow? And if it's a feature, just really any visual component is fantastic because it gives us a better sense of who the characters will be, and then we can kind of think about what the production will be from that project and get a better sense of the creative.
Okay. Wait, we're not asking questions yet. Hold on. We almost there.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So this is for you, Liliana, because when I was talking to Julius earlier, he was saying, "Oh, I saw this short earlier and I really liked it." But it was interesting because if you do a short, and I'm not a filmmaker, so I'm not as well versed. Maybe people who are doing shorts know exactly what they need to do. But I didn't think that if someone does a short, when they get a meeting and they get someone that's interested, they need to have a full script developed. Well, this is from Julius's perspective, right? So I know that's not necessarily the case from Julius Tennant.
Oh, sorry.
So,
I didn't know. My bad.
there was only one panel.
Sorry.
But no, so he was basically saying, well, he's like, I can't I can't really move forward with a short. So I need to, when you come to the table, you need to have a full script. And I know that's what makes it so challenging, and that's why this panel is so important, because it's different for different people.
Yeah, I think it's based on the company and their vision. Like, if I come across a short, I'm looking at it from a couple aspects. Story, I'm looking at it visually, so I'm like, who's the director, who wrote it? I'm looking at the actors, because most times, sometimes they're unknown, so who are they? And then based on what I have most interest in is who I would be like, oh, I'll do a general with that person, just to get a general sense of what they're interested in. Or if it was produced really well, bring in the producer. So it really just depends on what you're looking for. Like, for us, we look for everything. We have unscripted, we have scripted, we have digital, we have obviously film and micro-budgeted, small, massive, across the board. But I think ultimately, when you are coming in to sit across, just understand your project so well and go through what could possibly have been 100 questions, because when you're pitching a project to producers, they're going to ask you questions that you never, ever would have thought of. So being super prepared, having the materials, and just understanding that we are going to rip your project apart just to make sure that it could be something interesting. Don't take offense, just know that these are the questions we have to ask, because that's how you get something greenlit.
Right. But so, since Julia said that, and it doesn't necessarily align with what Shayla would consider, why is that?
I think a lady in the audience mentioned proof of concept.
I'm gonna get you later.
So I think what Julius is referring to, not all shorts are a proof of concept, but it's a very good way of visually seeing what the filmmaker sees in their head and how they see their script being made. I enjoy seeing shorts that are a proof of concept, because shorts are very hard to make. You have to have a whole idea in 15 minutes, and it has to have a beginning, middle, and end, and not all shorts are made that way. So you did a good job of doing a short. I'm going to trust that you have a good idea of how you want the feature to look. But with that said, too, you have to answer all the 150 questions that we're going to ask you. Because not only do we want to make sure that it's a good concept and a good idea, for me, it's very important to know that you're a good partner as well, that you're a good collaborator, that if you don't know the answer, you're open to ideas, that if you don't know the answer, you're open to the research. And I'm trying to see what your process looks like. Because we personally don't greenlight. We don't have the money to say, here's $1 gazillion, go make it. So we have to take you to studios. We're not going to take someone that's not prepared, because you get one chance. If we take you and they somehow greenlight your film and it flops, it's really hard for a person of color to fail up, unfortunately.
Very good point, very good point. So I'm gonna email y'all some more questions, just answer them and we're gonna post them on the website. But no, I wanna let the audience chime in. I see some people right now, like on the edge of their seat. So somebody swap me out a, handheld and then, is Julian in here? Look, did he leave? Cause I'm not trying to walk around. No, Nikki. Thank you.
They both have cords.
Yeah, but I'll give you this one.
Oh, yes, I think she's gonna have to get the first question.
Yeah, we're gonna let her get the first question, cause,
Oh, no, don't give away
She
the
said
mic. Don't give away the mic, just hold it, cause
Oh, we
she
can't
is
touch
already in
it.
trouble.
Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah, you
no,
gotta
no.
watch
It's fine. I know how to work a mic, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing yourself with you all, with us. I wanted to ask a question because I'm in like pre-production mode for like a short or anything. I have a feature mindset. I have this. I know I want to be a filmmaker. I'm on some Ava DuVernay shit. So I want to know how I go about it, basically. What would you advise for someone who's very green? Should I do like the proof of concept? Should I do a short? Should I like pitch there's so many options since we're in the age of content right now.
But you're in pre-production, you said.
I am, but I have different ideas. So I produce content primarily for a comedy company. I'm a comedian. I produce my live shows, and I have content that I do with that. I would like to extend that into a short or feature. And of course, I think I should start with the short, but if I want to have a feature, should I do a proof of concept for a feature film that I have and do the script? Or what would you suggest to someone who was a novice and like how they would get into it for a low budget, but also just, hey, I want to do something to get started?
Are you actress, writer, director, producer?
I mean, I can do whatever, so like.
Well, hold on. I'm sure you can do whatever, but what is your focus?
My focus is I would like to ultimately be a showrunner and have my own show and have but I would like to have films and I'm a producer. That's what I think I am. So, I got all this shit, right?
Do
like
all
I
the
got,
things.
I want to do all the things.
Do all of them.
But you ladies do a lot of things. So like if I wanted to start, I think that a short would be where I would start. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. And it would be like a proof of concept that would showcase a whole, like my whole platform is empowerment through entertainment for women.
Okay, so just to clarify,
Yes.
right? What do you need guidance on? Are you asking them whether or not you should choose to do a short over a feature?
Off of your comedy
Right.
special?
So no, not my comedy special. A proof of concept for a feature or a short. That is the basis of the question.
I would say if they're two different stories, if you have a proof of concept and you have a short, they're two different projects. Say one is a love story, one is a comedy. Yeah. Whichever one is better developed and whichever you can actually gather your community to support you in. And then you submit that to festivals and see if it gets traction. And your first one might not be your best one. So keep doing them for $50 in your apartment, one location. Get your content out. It seems like you want to do everything. So you have to constantly be doing everything to get better at it. I don't know if you're in school for filmmaking or content producing, but read up on what I'm forgetting on the word, but you said your pitch doc, your lookbook. I found the one for Stranger Things online. It's amazing. There's so many resources. You should know what a lookbook is. You should know what a general is. Constantly be reading the trades. And if you don't know something, you're at a panel, you don't know what it means, write it down and look it up. Because we're around. Yeah.
Well, so what's really important is when you are figuring out what you want to do in this industry, find the one thing that you know that you would be really great at and focus on that. I got in this industry being Will's assistant, and I worked really hard, which then got me a producer credit, which then got me the role that I'm in now, which will open other doors. But when you're trying to do everything, and this is my opinion, and feel like you're in a circle and you're just running around because you're not giving your time to one thing solely so that you could be the best at that. So why don't you just figure out exactly what it is you think would be great and go ahead and shoot something and then throw it up on YouTube or put it in a festival and see what the response will be. But trying to do both and all three and all of it, you'll be running in a circle.
Hello. Thank you so much for the information thus far. I have a quick question. I know, Shayla, you mentioned that Will Packer Media, you guys have a niche. And I know in Monkeypaw, you guys seem to have a niche. And then Julius mentioned earlier in another panel that they have a niche with social action change. How important is it for a filmmaker to have a specific niche as far as documentarian or focus on comedy or drama, et cetera, as far as their company as well? Should you be worried about that as an early filmmaker now, or is that something you just make what you want to make?
I think you should make what you make because it's gonna take time. Like when Will did Twa, he didn't know that like that was his niche. It took years for him and Rob to kind of figure out what worked. It just so happened that Will became really great at producing comedy. So then it was a comedy thing for a moment, and then we had drama. So it just grew from there. But I think figure out whatever that project is that you just in your heart, in your gut, know that people will respond to, and focus on that, and just keep it moving.
But Shayla, just to your point, Rob mentioned in a panel that I saw in Atlanta that they almost got pigeonholed when they did the gospel.
Well, yeah, because it was a Black film about Christians in the church. Yeah, and that's, one thing Hollywood will do is throw you in a box if you allow them to.
Right.
So it's a balance of, I think, trying everything, especially when you're starting out, seeing what your strong suit is, finding your focus, and then once you get traction, maybe being like, whoop, like I'm switching gears and now I have the pedigree to do so. I think for me, growing up as an exec, it was very important for me to identify myself as someone who is passionate about telling diverse stories, so that when the opportunity to work at JuVee came along, they were like, that's for Liliana, because she's put it out in the world that that's what she wants to do. Whereas if I'm like, I don't know, I'll do anything, they could have hired someone else.
Sometimes you have to do what gets response first. It's great that you have multiple interests and passions. Jordan, for instance, started in comedy, but always had a passion for horror. It doesn't mean that he liked any one better than the other, but it just meant one had opportunity at that moment, and then as the social climate shifted, it was a great time for horror, and so he was able to engage in both of his passions. So I would say continue to personally indulge in both, but then professionally just kind of put out your feelers and see what it takes.
Thank you.
Just to be mindful of time, I know we started a little bit late. Are you guys comfortable with us going a little bit over? Okay, cool.
If we could, can we hand her one mic and y'all share one, please?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Sophia Ellis, and I'm a cinematographer, which apparently is a really difficult field to get into.
That's dope.
Well, as dope as it is, I did what you guys said, because I understand that I have to put myself out, so I will write, produce, and direct my own. And then I'm like, okay, y'all, here go my work. Here's my link. Hire me. And I will literally be like, here you go, here you go. And they like, we don't think you can carry the equipment. So how do I break? I know, girl. So how do I break that? Like, how do I? Yeah, how can I? I live here locally.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know how to break it. So that's why I just write and direct my own. But like you were saying, like sooner or later it get overwhelming to do it. So what to do?
Shayla, you got thoughts. Go and let them out. I saw it. You was like, I'm gonna let somebody else.
Well, I mean, where have you put your stuff? Where, you've shared these links where?
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and my film is in the film festival. I submitted 2 film festivals. So,
Listen, you're rare because one, you're an African-American female that does cinematography. So you are in a lane, like, there might be 4 other females in the world that might be doing the same thing you're doing, which is amazing, right? So now it's you getting to the next level. So have you only done shorts?
I just did my first short last month that got picked up for this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you considered reaching out to agencies about representation, perhaps? So that might be something you may want to consider. Not a CAA or anything like that, but some of the smaller kind of boutique agencies that do rep, cinematographers for an ultimate opportunity to just say, here's my work, just put it out there more. And then I would submit to more film festivals. I know it can get costly, but out of all the ones, maybe pick 3 or 4 other ones, and then also just network. Like, it might require you knowing, you know, in Atlanta, they have tons of networking events through the Atlanta Film Office as well as the Georgia Film Office. And, you know, Atlanta's not far from here. So it would require you to go up and go to other markets that have a thriving film community and just meeting people. But stick to it.
I am,
Stick to
because
it.
I actually like doing it.
Yeah.
I would also say, you know, it's really fun to have full control as the cinematographer for a short, but also working your way up. I mean, I spoke about my Craigslist internship, but what productions are filming in Austin that you can be a second AC on, or a grip on, or
Yeah,
a
well,
gap
I apply for all of those.
Yeah, yeah.
The white, no offense. Hold on, let me look at the crowd. The white man to get it before.
Well,
I would, sorry y'all, if there's any in the audience, but I'm just being real.
Listen, the grind is real. So the reality is, you know, you have to give your all. If you speak to anybody that has had success in this business, you know, on the crew or the filmmaking side, they will tell you the exact same thing. Like, Stomp the Yard they got every door closed on them when they were out in LA trying to pitch Stomp the Yard. Hollywood didn't start calling until You Got Served came out. And there was like, and that had done really well, and nobody realized these black kids dancing, oh my gosh. And that is how Stomp the Yard
that's
got
nuts.
made. Like,
What?
it's a gamble.
That's just so confusing.
No, stick to it. It's not gonna be easy, but if you stick to it, you know.
Just one thing to say is tomorrow we have IATSE, the local 484 union coming, and they're doing a panel that Nikki's going to be on about hair and makeup, and diversifying hair and makeup. But the whole point of bringing them is to, one, get them to educate people on how to become a part of the union and where the opportunities are, but two, also hold them accountable because, you know, they need to have a diverse group of talent within the union, and if they don't have it, they should be trying to figure out how to get there.
And that might be a reason why you're being overlooked, because you're not in the union.
Well, you'll find out tomorrow. What time is the panel, Nikki? 2 o'clock tomorrow. We'll be talking through all of that, but that was one of the things I don't think that people know, and so that's why we're having that conversation. And we got a question back there.
You got this young man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do I got a stunner? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right, no problem. So, you spoke about boutique agencies. Yeah. And I've been in, like, I've won the last 3 film festivals I was at. This is my 4th one that my film is submitted to. And so I have not been able to get an agent, even though I've talked to some and was able to pitch some at ABFF. And
Are you an actor, director?
I produced my own short. And so, do you know some of the boutique agencies?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm the worst at that. I just know the agency home.
I just know they were always saying they don't take unsolicited submissions. You got to be referred. And so I didn't know. When you said that, it drove a question.
Listen, every agency has their own way of receiving people. You were at ABFF. You were in the face of some of those agencies, which is great. But it's you being able to somehow be savvy enough and finesse your way into having a conversation with those people while you're face to face.
Like we having right now.
Exactly.
I'll see you after the
But
panel.
I'm not an agency, so I
Right.
can't tell you about that.
Hi, my name is Serge. I'm a producer out of Dallas. I just had a couple questions for y'all specifically around building relationships with sales agents. So what does that look like, I guess, for y'all as far as the relationships that you maintain on the distribution side and also with sales agents? How do you do that? And if you could maybe even take a step forward, and for somebody who is kind of outside of LA, what would that look like to start to build those relationships on the sales agent side and distribution side?
I feel like I should speak on this since I worked in international sales. It depends on the company. The one that I worked on, the way that projects got to us was through agencies. So it had to have a good package to be able to sell overseas. And when I interview, you know, I'm again pitching myself passionate about diverse stories, and they're like, well, you know, if Moonlight would have come to our desk, we would have passed on it because it has no international value. I'm like, great, that's why I'm here. I want to see how you're running these numbers.
That's fine. Hi, I'm Star. So I'm curious, the transition from Atlanta to LA, because I know you came from Atlanta, I know you went to SCAD, so I just want to know, what was that like?
Well, it was helpful going out there with a job. That was important. And it was different. LA is LA. And if you allow yourself to get in that bubble, you can get caught up real quick. I have seen a lot of people come and go. But ultimately, if you haven't, I always say, try and go out there with a plan. When you just up and move, it's going to be really difficult. But it was pretty seamless for me.
Mine was not. The reason why I went to Atlanta in the first place is because I had a PA opportunity, but the show got canceled. And so I just relocated and it got canceled maybe that first week. So that's why I went to SCAD in the first place. And it ended up being a blessing in disguise, which is fine, but it definitely was not my original plan. And so to go from there, I literally drove from Atlanta to LA, just put all my stuff in the car and left just because for me, I knew I wanted to work in pre-production. So there are several opportunities in Atlanta, especially if you want to be on set. But for me, because I knew I wanted to be more involved with like production companies and working pre-pro and writing, I knew that I had to leave. Not to say they don't have opportunities there also, but just I knew that I had my eyes on Monkeypaw. so I think it also has to do with intentionality with what you want your goals to be and where they're based. But in terms of that adjustment, it was night and day, even in terms of finding community, and that too is why it led to me doing Black Film Week, is just because frankly I couldn't find Black people when I first got there. And so everyone was really spread apart. It's almost like different boroughs, similar to New York. LA is huge, and so for Hollywood specifically, some of what you were saying, if it's just a very different community from you were talking about Inglewood, where you're from. Yeah, night and day difference. So if you're looking for a community and food or who can do your hair, like it's much more difficult, I would say. But there are resources that you can go through to discover that. And the best thing I would suggest is making your community before you relocate. That's the best thing you could possibly do. So you already have kind of at least some type of familiarity because it's very different. But positives: beach, mountains.
Hello. My question is specifically for Elon. What would be your advice for someone else who is also, I've already kind of got it figured out that I'm focused on pre-pro and just solely writing. Well, not just solely to Elon, but what would y'all's advice be to someone who maybe does feel like they know what their niche is? Just in terms of like, should I continue writing and, put it somewhere safe? Because I know that just sending out scripts blindly is not the move. So, yeah, what would y'all's advice be?
Are you based here?
Yes.
And just what are the other areas of interest?
I'm also interested in like social media and basically most pre-pro stuff. Like, I think it was said being on set is kind of one of those like things. I'm the exact same way. So pre-pro is like all me.
For me, I would tell you the same thing I was telling Star, is that you should choose specifically where you'd be interested in working. The more specific you are, the easier it is to kind of make it there because everyone knows somebody that knows somebody else. And if you just make that known to others, you'll find a way to get connected. Because that's pretty much how I ended up where I'm at, because one of my internships was like, who do you most admire, who do you want to work with? I said Jordan Peele. So he happened to know a coordinator that was in Monkeypaw, and then we had lunch, and then it kind of went on from there. So I just think that even though you have all those different interests, you should definitely continue to engage in them in your own free time with however it is that you're supporting that or engaging with that, definitely with your writing and building your portfolio. But choose a specific company and then research them and then try to find your way around in that way.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, do we already have a hand up? Okay, this will be our last question.
So I was curious, like someone hit on the head earlier about being in Atlanta, and it's like I'm a content creator from a smaller market, And I'm just curious, like every time I meet other creatives that come from a larger market like New York or Los Angeles, they say that you kind of have to make that jump. But then a lot of smaller markets, they are like, they want to have content creators stay home. So what, if somebody that's in between trying to figure out which, like if I want to jump or not, what would your recommendation be? To stay and create content in your small area or jump in like a larger market?
What's your field? What's your area?
Writer-director.
For me, I feel like that's something that I agree that you could do anywhere, just because if you're doing independent work, then you can make that, and then, like we were saying, make it seen in multiple spaces like festivals. If you're an editor, there are many different things that you could do remotely or from any location. I just think that specifically for pre-pro and for different agencies, depending on what route you want to go in, then yes, you have to relocate. But for that, no, absolutely, I think that you could build your community there and then still be seen.
And I also think that you could visit other markets, not relocate, but tap into those markets to meet people for opportunities to collaborate.
And it's so much cheaper to live here. I recommend reading a book like Brothers, so the Duplass brothers created their career here because it was cheaper to write, edit, direct, and do everything here. And, you know, they went to Sundance, and again, their films were becoming festival darlings, and Hollywood came to them. But do you want to live in a nice place, or do you want to live at home like I do in LA?
Thank you, ladies, so much. Wait,
Thanks for having us.
wait, there's one thing that if you guys could just close out. Oh, thank you, Nikki. So what does Shayla want to do next?
I'm doing what I want to do.
Not like outside of, like, you know, like what haven't you done that you want to do? It doesn't mean that you want to leave, you know, we're not on live anymore.
Something that's become really important to me in the last couple of years is putting more faces of color in agencies and studios. So I kind of restructured our internship program to, listen, we accept everybody, but I definitely make it clear at HBCU specifically that we are constantly looking for interns, and we have a pretty intense internship program. But then also, once those kids have gone through our internship program, helping them get placed at a studio or at a agency for, you know, the mailroom or another internship if they're still in school. I work really hard to try and get them at least interviews. You know, once they go through that door, they've got to, you know, nail it. But I at least try to utilize my resources to help them, you know, get through the door. That's really important because when I'm in these meetings, sometimes I'm the only African American, or it's just the filmmakers that are African American, and we're talking about a project that is African American. So, you know, it's just being able to help put more faces of color in these high-level positions, not coordinator, not manager, executive. So that's kind of my focus and passion.
See? I wasn't trying to.
I didn't know where you were going.
No, of course not. We on live. What about you, Elon?
For me, it's mentorship, and again, through Black Film Week, this is something that I'm building up because similar to what Shayla was saying, there's a huge gap within the industry in those spaces, but also there's a hidden curriculum that a lot of people don't know and realize, such as like going into a meeting, not needing to wear a full suit and tux, just so you can be more casual, even less casual than this in my company at least. And so stuff like that just is helpful if you have a mentor in that space that can kind of guide you in that. So I'm working on ways to kind of basically help you reach back and bring more people to the West Coast.
Okay.
For myself in the company, I call myself a baby exec. So it's sort of going up those ranks, getting more projects into the green light phase, and being in production and seeing our babies, you know, be fully formed. Babies meaning our projects. And then on a personal sense, I'm finishing up my short, and I'm very much involved with the Latino community, and a goal of mine is to have all of the Latino groups and other groups of you know, people of color work together. There's a lot of separation in my community with like, well, this Latino organization doesn't talk to this one, and I'm showing up, you know, every weekend to all of them, and they're all my friends, even if they don't talk to each other. So, creating more of that unity. Sorry? Yeah. So creating that community, and And being patient, with a lot of our interns too, we take up, sometimes it's their first internship and you can't just sort of say, thank you for reading a script and doing coverage, like good luck. It's keeping in touch with them and really developing them so that maybe not right away you're gonna set them up with the meeting at CAA, but 2-3 years from now, you're, enriching their lives and really nourishing them so that they can build a career.
Yeah, the Academy Gold, there's a program that the Academy started called the Academy Gold. Have y'all heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was with IMAX, we were part of like one of the founding whatever. I think it's still going, but that was one of the things, like they didn't want to just give you an internship. They wanted to usher you through and provide you with a mentor, even when you get your first job, to help you to grow throughout. So that's a really great perspective from all of you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
So
you.
glad to have you. And thank you, everyone who came.